Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be taking up more of your questions in another episode of Ask Judy. I have a question here from Lisa, who says, do the writers heavily consider the audience's preference or perspective before making such radical decisions about what relationships will be heartbreaking, mending, or dissolved? Sometimes their decisions are not based on viewership popularity, or are their decisions reliant on which actor draws the most profit, or which actor the studio can afford to play or continue to play a role? Lots of factors here. Okay, so, I think it really sort of depends. I think perhaps there are times where certain characters that aren't meant to be major players, like you hear things about, like in Happy Days, that originally the character Fonzie was just meant to be sort of a supporting character, but he was so popular with the audience that he became sort of almost, the main character of the show. So things like that can happen. I don't know that that was the case with any of the relationships on the Waltons. I think some of it was availability of actors. For instance, I think John Ritter was really popular, but when he got Three's Company, he wasn't an option. So there were things like that. Of course, Jonathan Frakes started getting a lot of work, so he wasn't necessarily available to come back, which was why he didn't do the last appearance when Ashley did come back, when Aaron was trying to decide between Paul and Ashley. And so it was a different actor because they weren't able to wait until Jonathan Frakes was available again. And I'm sure how much actors cost does come into play at times. So I don't know on our show that they really, sad to say, paid a lot of attention to what all of you thought, but I think it does make a difference at times, and oftentimes roles are recast. They'll do a pilot of a show and they'll screen it for people, and if the audience doesn't respond well to certain actors, they might replace them before they go to series. So it does make a difference. Your views do matter. All right, this question, I'm not sure how these syllables are supposed to break up, but it looks like Acel Margan. So sorry, I probably just mangled that. But you asked, regarding directing, is the director present at all filming, or does an assistant sometimes oversee a scene? So I did sort of write this answer to you, but I thought it was interesting and might appeal to other people who might have a similar question. Directors pretty much direct all of the scenes with dialogue and with actors, particularly main actors. Sometimes an assistant director might handle some insert shots, or like if they just need to go grab something or some background thing or some what we call second unit. There will sometimes be a second unit director, and sometimes that is the assistant director who will go and get drive-bys. All those things when I talk about, they took the cars, John Dayton said, they took the cars up to Fraser Park or Franklin Canyon, and they just did drive-bys, and they had one of the transportation people drive the vehicle because it was too far away to tell who was driving. Those types of things. The director would not go out to do that. So sometimes shows that have action, they'll have a second unit director who shoots a lot of the action things where the actors aren't the ones doing the work. But when it comes to actually filming the scenes with the actors, that's pretty much the director, unless something happens, then the director can't be there, he gets sick, an assistant director might have to step in. Pretty much the director wants to be there. A question and comment here from Rhea Dance, who said, whenever I think of breaking the fourth wall, I instantly go back to Mr. Roper nodding at the audience on Three's Company. Always makes me laugh. I think a cool idea would be to compile all the viewer questions and your answers into a book. Wow, that's an interesting idea. Maybe I'll get somebody on that. That would be awesome. A question, how difficult is it to keep the reflection of film equipment from reflecting off a person's glasses? What's done to prevent reflection from glasses? Yeah, mirrors, glasses, like I've shot in kitchens where, with glass in the cabinets or reflection off the refrigerator. So you have to sort of angle things to prevent that. With glasses, sometimes you do see the lights up above reflected in someone's glasses. I think sometimes how the actor has to, keep their head at a certain angle, because if if they go up and the glasses catch the light. So I think it's a matter of those lights being high enough. They can also sometimes put what we call flags. So those are sort of felt things on metal that in different shapes and sizes, and they can be designed to block light from hitting certain areas. So they might also just sort of flag something that's hitting on the actor's glasses that they don't need, or move a light. So they do things like that to prevent that from being a distraction. Tamara Franks asked this question in regards to a couple of our episodes where she said, I always wondered how the Turners were making a living after Red stopped going on the road to play music. It was still the Depression and they didn't have any other source of income. So that would be like in The Gift when Seth died. And then when we got to the episode The Comeback, it seemed like he wasn't performing anymore. Whether he was getting any kind of royalties at that point in time, I don't know if royalties existed at that point. So I think they just sort of, maybe he had earned enough money prior to have some savings. I think it's just sometimes those types of questions, they just pretend don't exist, is I think, frankly, what it is. You weren't meant to ask that question or notice that he'd spent a lot of time not working. And maybe his wife was taking in laundry, or who, I'm not sure. Maybe there was family money. Maybe I think you just weren't supposed to notice that. Also very observant of you, Tamara, who had this other question. I always wondered about the damage to the fender in John Boy's car. Did they have a spare fender that they painted to match that they could damage and put on the car? Or did they make sure that they had a replacement fender before they damaged the one that was on the car? This is in the episode The Lie. So I think it could have been either of those. They could have had one that was damaged, or they could have kind of create like how they can do with prosthetics and stuff like that for people, for faces and things like that. They might have put some sort of removable bonding or something, built it out a bit to create what looked like the damage, and then, or put a different bumper on it for just to do the damage and then put the other one back on. So I would say it was something like that, because they had to know it was coming because they read the episode. So the transportation department, the prop department, whoever had to handle things like that with the vehicles would have had that set up and have those sorts of answers. I know we didn't have a duplicate car, so they would have done something to fudge that relative to the fender. I love this catch by Troy Dog, this is in regards to the episode, The Inspiration. He said, is it me, or at 1429, when they go to the home, the screen door is missing, or was that a different house set? So when Drew takes Elizabeth home after the dance, and on the front porch, when they're saying goodnight, she opens the door and then she kind of closes it because she's kind of hanging out for that goodnight kiss. So I didn't notice the screen door wasn't there. And I think that it was something that they did because it would have been really physically awkward to deal with the screen door, because they would have had to open the screen door and then go for the other door. So based on where the two of them were standing, the positioning with the camera would have just been really awkward. Would have had to open the screen, then open the door, then close the door, then close the screen or hold the screen. So I think they just took it off to eliminate that being an issue, because the scene and how the scene played, they considered more important than dealing with the practicality of where's the screen door. And I'd be curious if anybody else noticed that the screen was missing, because I sure didn't. I was busy watching the scene, but that's a really good catch. And I did go back and look at that. And you are correct that they just took the screen door off to make it easier to shoot. And this is from Gail Mondrel, who said, wanted to know what the source of the huge campaign posters behind the candidate in the episode The Prize, if he knows what the source was, and was asking if maybe John Dayton knew. I took a look at that. That was in the episode The Prize, and it's when he's going to give that speech. And it's a big poster of Roosevelt and Garner. And I'm sure that the art department just created that they found those two photos and they blew them up and created that poster. That would be the typical sort of thing that would happen whenever anything had to be there in a scene. It was either the prop department or the art department. Something that big was likely the art department. And then this comment from Judge 102 that I just really touched me, and I just wanted to share it with all of you. And thank you for this comment. When I'm having a bad day, bad week, etc., after watching a few minutes of the news and seeing all the bad in our country and how the ridiculous, evil people are treating one another, I can turn on the Waltons, and it somewhat changes my feelings. I'm sure someone here probably thinks I'm crazy or something, but it's just my 2 cents. Also, I'd love to see a new Waltons TV movie like the one from the 90s. Thank you, Judy, for having this show and bringing the cast on. So thank you. That means a lot to me to hear you and other people talk about how watching the show helps comfort you and offset some of the difficult things that are going on in our lives and in the world today. And I'm just very touched that the show does that for all of you. And that's, I think, what we always tried to do. And I think that really is the best in television and entertainment, when we can bring about a positive feeling for the people who are watching. So thank you to all of you who continue to support the show. And thank you to all of you who continue to support my channel here and this community and keep it warm and inviting and positive, because that's what I wish for this group. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Ask Judy. I'll be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.